The Titanic, Legacy, Construction, The Tragedy at Sea, Introduction, The Ship That Could Never Sink. Over a century ago, a tragedy unfolded that would forever change maritime history and the collective human consciousness. The sinking of the RMS Titanic on April 15, 1912, in the frigid waters of the North Atlantic remains one of the most infamous maritime disasters of all time. Though the event is more than 100 years old, it continues to fascinate people worldwide. Marketed as unsinkable, the Titanic was a marvel of engineering and luxury. A ship of dreams filled with the world's wealthiest elites and hopeful immigrants alike met its doom just 4 days into its maiden voyage. While many know the broader story, fewer are aware of the extraordinary details, myths, and lesser-known facts that surround the ship's voyage and its legacy. 1. The vision of Titanic, an engineering marvel. At the dawn of the 20th century, a race was underway between major shipping companies to create the fastest and most luxurious ships in the world. In this context, the White Star Line launched a plan to build 3 Olympic-class liners, the Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. These ships would offer unprecedented comfort and luxury, rivaling even the most opulent hotels on land. The dimensions of glory. Length 883 feet, 269 meters. Longer than 3 football fields. Weight over 46,000 tons. Decks 9. Top speed 24 knots, around 44 km. Titanic burned about 825 tons of coal daily and used over 10,000 light bulbs, making it one of the most power-hungry and electrically advanced vessels of its time. The ship could carry up to 3,500 people, including both passengers and crew, but had around 2,300 people on board during its maiden voyage. Luxury like no other. The Titanic was a floating palace. It boasted a gymnasium, a swimming pool, Turkish baths, a squash court, lavish dining rooms, and grand staircases. First-class suites equivalent to modern-day luxury penthouses. Its luxury even extended to the provisions: 40,000 fresh eggs, 1,000 bottles of wine, and over 14,000 gallons of drinking water used per day. 2. Who was on board? From millionaires to immigrants, the Titanic was a social microcosm. It carried some of the wealthiest people of the time alongside working-class immigrants in search of a better life. John Jacob Astor Ford, the wealthiest man afloat. Perhaps the most famous passenger was John Jacob Astor Ford, an American business magnate whose fortune was valued at $87 million at the time, equivalent to $2.3 billion today. A war veteran, real estate tycoon, and even a science fiction writer, Astor was the epitome of the American elite. Astor had built the famous Astoria Hotel in New York, which later merged with the Waldorf Hotel to become the Waldorf Astoria, one of the most iconic hotels in history. Sadly, Astor perished with the ship alongside his dog Kitty. His young pregnant wife survived and inherited his fortune. 3. Violetta Jessup, the unsinkable woman. In the annals of maritime survival, few stories are as surreal as that of Violetta Jessup, a British nurse and stewardess. She holds the bizarre distinction of surviving not 1, not 2, but 3 Olympic-class ship disasters. Titanic 1912 survived the iceberg strike and was rescued by the Carpathia. Britannic 1916 suffered an explosion in the Aegean Sea and sank in 55 minutes. Jessup survived. Olympic 1911 collided with the British warship HMS Hawke but didn't sink. Jessup was aboard. Her life is often described as either a curse or miracle. 4. An avoidable tragedy, warnings ignored. However, the confidence in its engineering and the desire to make a record-breaking crossing led Captain Edward Smith to maintain high speed. On the night of April 14, 1912, Lookout Frederick Fleet rang the infamous bell and shouted, "Iceberg right ahead!" However, the ship turned too late and scraped along the iceberg's side, creating fatal damage across multiple compartments. Fleet later testified that lack of binoculars contributed to the delayed spotting. Haunted by the event, he tragically took his own life in 1965. 5. Sinking sequence and panic on board. The Titanic struck the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. and sank by 2:20 a.m., a span of less than 3 hours. Despite the urgent situation, many passengers didn't initially realize the danger. Music continued to play on board. Lifeboats were deployed half full due to confusion and disbelief. The ship had 20 lifeboats, though it was designed to carry 65, a miscalculation based on the idea that lifeboats were for ferrying passengers to rescue ships not surviving a total loss. Demographics of survival. Historian Chuck Annecy analyzed Titanic's survival rates. Female first class 97% survived. Male first class 32% survived. Male second class worst survival rate only 14 of 168 survived. 7. Animal tragedy and loyalty beyond death. Yes, Titanic carried pets, dogs, cats, and birds. Only 2 dogs survived. One of the most heartbreaking stories is of Anne Elizabeth Isham, a first-class passenger who reportedly refused to leave her Great Dane behind. She was later found frozen in the water, her arms wrapped around the animal. She was one of only 4 first-class women who perished. 8. The last baby on the Titanic, Milvina Dean. Eliza Gladys Milvina Dean was only 2 months old when she boarded the Titanic as a third-class passenger. Her family intended to start a new life in Kansas. 9. Finding the Titanic wreck, a Cold War secret. Despite its size, Titanic's final resting place remained unknown for 73 years. The ocean is vast and early recovery efforts failed. It wasn't until 1985 that Titanic was found. Titanic in pop culture, James Cameron's cinematic triumph. In 1997, director James Cameron released Titanic, the most expensive film of its time. Budget $200 million, $360 million in today's value. Box office $1.8 billion, highest at the time. More expensive to make than the actual Titanic itself, which cost $7.5 million in 1912, $190 million today. 1. The aftermath, ice-cold reality and survivor's plight. As the Titanic sank beneath the icy waves of the North Atlantic, chaos gave way to silence. Of the 2,224 people on board, more than 1,500 perished, making it one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. The survivors, all 705 of them, were left drifting in lifeboats amidst the debris. Hypothermia, emotional trauma, and grief set in almost immediately. It wasn't until hours later that the RMS Carpathia arrived to rescue the lifeboat survivors. Many later described the cries of those in the freezing water as the most haunting sound they'd ever heard. Medium is reporting they all are safe headlines. In an era before satellites and global news networks, the initial reports following Titanic's sinking were riddled with errors, assumptions, and outright falsehoods. Many newspapers eager to publish first printed that all Titanic passengers are safe. Maritime safety reforms, lessons from the wreck. The Titanic tragedy forced a complete overhaul of international maritime laws. Key changes introduced after Titanic. The International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS. Signed in 1914, SOLAS became the cornerstone of modern maritime safety. Lifeboats for all. New laws mandated enough lifeboats for every person on board, a drastic shift from the Titanic era protocol. Titanic versus other iconic ships, a size perspective. While Titanic was the largest ship in the world in 1912, she didn't hold that title for long. Comparison with other historic ships. Lusitania, 1906, 790 feet. Titanic was over 883 feet. Queen Mary, 1934, 1019 feet, surpassed Titanic's length by over 130 feet. 5. Titanic's sister ships, Olympic and Britannic. Titanic had 2 sister ships. RMS Olympic, nicknamed Old Reliable, it had a long career and was retired in 1935-6. The myth of the unsinkable ship. One of the most repeated beliefs is that Titanic was widely advertised as unsinkable. While this wasn't official White Star Line marketing, newspapers and public perception labeled it as such. Did they say unsinkable? White Star Line called Titanic practically unsinkable due to its watertight compartments. The press shortened this to simply unsinkable, a term that now sounds tragically ironic. How the Titanic sank, a scientific breakdown. The Titanic didn't sink all at once. Here's a technical look. The iceberg sliced along 300 feet of the starboard hull. 5 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments flooded. As the bow filled with water, the stern rose. The ship now lies in 2 major pieces on the seabed, 600 feet below the surface, surrounded by debris and rust-eating bacteria. Titanic in film and pop culture. While the 1997 James Cameron film Titanic is the most famous depiction, the ship has been featured in over 20 films and documentaries. key representations. A Night to Remember 1958, praised for historical accuracy. Titanic 1997, Cameron's blockbuster brought new generations into the story. Titanic, Blood and Steel 2012, a mini-series exploring the ship's construction. 9. Who was to blame? Blame for the Titanic disaster has shifted over time. Possible parties. Captain Edward Smith, criticized for sailing at full speed despite ice warnings, said. Titanic wreck today, a time capsule under the sea. Titanic's final resting place is slowly deteriorating. The Titanic was a perfect storm of human ambition and natural consequence. It blended the heights of engineering brilliance with the depths of human error. But more than anything, it brought stories of sacrifice, bravery, love, and sorrow.